Putin has always been paranoid. He's a former KGB man who never managed to shake off his roots. Paranoia was good for Putin. It kept him in power through purges, making it clear to anyone who might think of rebellion that getting too big for your boots could lead to an unexpected accident somewhere near an open window. Putin's paranoia always served his power, but there's something different about Putin's paranoia now. Putin is no longer the man who uses his paranoia as a superpower. That constant distrust of everything around him is now tinged with an immense amount of fear. Why? Ukraine made it that way. It has turned Putin into the most paranoid man in the world, and that could spell his downfall. In Moscow, a motorcade races through the streets. It looks official. Big black cars moving in formation, clearly carrying President Putin. The average Russian would see his motorcade and assume that Putin is on his way to something important, perhaps a meeting in the Kremlin, or is on his way to give a speech to the people. But what they don't know is that the motorcades are often empty. Decoys used by Putin to fool anybody who might be watching into thinking that he's heading one way when he's actually going somewhere different. And as the decoy cars race on, Russia's leader may be somewhere else entirely. Not even trackable because he isn't taking roads that are on any Russian maps. Hiding away in an armored train, Putin may be riding to one of his residences or to another of his bunkers via a secret network of railway lines that have been built for him and him alone. Putin's paranoia has run amok. Every single journey he takes now requires several fakes and decoys as he desperately tries to evade notice when he's on the move. That's according to an August 12th report in the New York Times, which says that Putin's paranoia now runs so deep that he's taking every measure you could possibly think of, and more that nobody in their right mind would consider, just to keep himself off the radar and out of the sights of Ukraine's long-range drone operators. Putin's only goal now is to survive in a war that he started, to the point that journalists in his own country have taken to trying to figure out where he is by tracking the wilting of his office plants. When those plants are dying, that's a sign that nobody is maintaining them, meaning Putin isn't at the office. Putin needs the mystery. An intense paranoia that always existed was amplified during the COVID-19 pandemic. It escalated further when Ukraine developed the ability to strike Russia with drones, and it went into overdrive in the wake of America's 2026 campaigns that resulted in the ousting of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and the killing of Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. And we can see that growing paranoia on full display whenever Putin makes one of his increasingly sparse public appearances. Take the Russian leader's visit to Novosibirsk on August 11th. To start, United 24 media reports Putin arrived under the cover of nightfall for an event that would see him open the Siberian circular photon source in Science City, Konservy. Putin couldn't miss this opportunity to proclaim Russia's scientific brilliance, even if he would rather have been hunkered down in one of his bunkers. So he went, but only after his security goons ensured that police officers were stationed every 50 meters along the route he took to Novosibirsk. Residents were told to stay indoors, keep their windows covered, and to stay away from the glass. The implication was clear. If we even so much as think that you are looking at Putin, you'll be in trouble. There'll be no optical or electronic equipment used by anybody, nothing that could give away Putin's position. Metal barriers were erected, roads were blocked, and movement limitations were put in place. All so that Putin could cut a ribbon and give a short speech. It is utterly ridiculous. An insane amount of security to protect a strongman leader who is supposed to symbolize Russian might. But for Putin, all that we've described so far is a daily occurrence. The facts of a life now lived in fear of an attack, be it by Ukrainian drones or something or somebody much closer to home. The paranoia runs deeper, much deeper. All we've discussed so far are a handful of isolated reports and showcases of how scared Putin has become of threats. There is more. Take the cloned offices. In a December 2025 report, Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty revealed that an investigation examining dozens of hours of footage of Putin's main office revealed that Russia's leader doesn't just have one office at all, he has at least 3, each a clone of the others designed to look identical. Why? For the same reasons as the secret train tracks and the decoy motorcades. Putin is desperate to ensure that nobody knows where he really is at any given time, and he certainly doesn't want anybody to know that he is in a specific office they could target. The subterfuge was only discovered because there are slight imperfections in the different offices. The placement of a door handle here or a different seam in a wall there are the only indications that Putin has clone offices, and they'll only be caught by the most eagle-eyed people. The average person watching an address by Putin or viewing Kremlin-published footage of him working would have no idea that he could be in Valdai or Sochi, rather than his Novo-Ogaryovo office that everybody already knows about. These offices aren't an experiment. They are the institutionalization of Putin's insane paranoia. Standard practice for a leader who never takes his eyes off the possibility that a Ukrainian drone could be coming at any moment. Other standard practices in Putin's world of deception include the use of the Konservy strategy, literally translated to canned goods. This strategy involves filming footage of Putin in one of his offices as he works, takes calls, and does the things that a president is supposed to do. Only that footage isn't released to the Russian people, at least not right away. It's canned. The Kremlin sits on these recordings, often for months, before it releases them on state television, often during reports where it wants to convince the Russian people that Putin is working hard in his office, when the reality is he's nowhere near any desk that isn't underground in a bunker somewhere. In recent years, journalists discovered at least 10 instances of these canned videos being published over a 2-month span, with more following later. It's another layer to the cloned offices strategy. Not only does Putin have at least 3 offices that are almost exactly the same, but he's likely not in any of those offices when the Kremlin claims that he is. We can say one thing: Putin would be a shoo-in for the gold medal if there was a world championship of hide-and-seek. Of course, the Kremlin denies all of this, the New York Times points out. And after the denial comes the refusal to make any more comments, which we all know is the best way to prove that you're telling the truth. Sarcasm aside, let's come back to the secret train tracks. Those aren't new additions to the Russian landscape. The New York Times reported on them back in 2021, noting that residents in Valdai had told the outlet that strange new railway lines had appeared in the city, none of which could be found on any maps. Satellite images later confirmed their existence, along with that of a helipad attached to a new railway station, all linking to Putin's Valdai compound. No trains or helicopters carrying anybody other than Putin can use these lines or visit the Valdai station. And when Putin does ride a train, he does it in his now trademark terrified fashion. Armor everywhere for Mr. Putin. That's according to CNN, which published a report on what it calls Putin's ghost train in 2023. Heavily armored and loaded with all of the amenities that a dictator could want, including a gym, spa, and what the outlet called beauty equipment. That includes a radio frequency machine that is supposed to enhance the tautness of somebody's skin. Maybe Putin is as afraid of the ravages of Father Time as he is of Ukraine's drones. The train car was built in 2018. Ironically, much of the gym equipment installed in the car was made in the US, and the main room that Putin uses is specially outfitted to prevent the use of any sort of listening devices. You might think that Air Force One is impressive. You might even think that US President Donald Trump went a little overboard when he secretly switched planes when flying out from the NATO summit in Ankara due to the potential threat of an Iranian assassination attempt, leaving some members of his cabinet on what became a decoy plane in the process. But this is next-level paranoia from Putin. And if we're going to compare the two leaders, Putin's security force easily comes out on top. According to the French outlet LCI, America's Secret Service has around 7,000 agents. Russia's equivalent, the FSO, or Federal Protective Service, has 50,000 members, including a group known as the Kremlin Regiment, which exists solely to guard the presidential compound in the heart of Moscow. A strange task to have, given that it's become clear by now that Putin is trying to spend as little time as possible in Russia's capital city. He wouldn't want to make himself a target after all. And ultimately, that's what all of this paranoia is about. Putin thinks that something bad is going to happen to him. He thinks that all of the time. The paranoia that was once a tool he used to maintain his grip on power has become an albatross around his neck, and Ukraine is the reason why. But before we explain more, this is a reminder that you're watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the perfect time to hit the button and enable notifications so you don't miss what we have coming up. We touched on this earlier, but the ramping up of the paranoia that always existed in Putin started during the pandemic. In a September 2020 report, the New York Times revealed that Putin was making grandiose claims about Russia having conquered COVID-19, all as he lived in a completely virus-free bubble at home, rarely leaving for public appearances and requiring everybody who wanted to meet him to spend an extended period in quarantine before he would allow it. That is such typical Putin. Talk a big game while you hide away and pretend that you're not terrified of the very thing you claim to have conquered. Ukraine knows that approach all too well. At one point, members of the FSO contacted a company with a request to build movable tunnels that could douse people in clouds of disinfectant in an instant, all to serve Putin's fear of the virus behind the pandemic. All of this was happening as Putin and the Kremlin celebrated the first of Russia's lockdowns, which uncoincidentally came ahead of a July 1, 2020 referendum that, if it went Putin's way, would allow him to stay in power until 2036. Putin hid, the lockdown was lifted prematurely, COVID-19 cases tripled in just 2 weeks. If we thought that we were starting to see a descent into madness with Putin's exaggerated responses to the pandemic, the unexpected outcome of his war in Ukraine sent him over the edge. Ukraine was never supposed to be able to strike Russia. Hell, Ukraine wasn't even supposed to defend itself. Putin thought that his army would steamroll through Ukraine to take Kyiv in a matter of days. But even after that didn't happen, Putin wasn't too worried. Ukraine had no long-range weapons, and certainly nothing that could travel far enough to strike him in one of his residences or offices. Then drones came along. And over the years, Ukraine has consistently developed its drones to the point where it has an entire arsenal of UAVs that can travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. And just like that, there was a long-range threat against Russia, leading to Putin losing his mind. Many of the measures that we've covered so far in this video serve as a timeline of Putin's developing fear. Now that we're in 2026, Putin lives in constant fear that a Ukrainian drone could strike him at any moment. We saw that during Russia's May Victory Day parade. This celebration of Russian heroics during World War II has been turned into a display of supposed might under Putin, who uses the event to project strength by having weapons and tanks parade down the street. But not in 2026. The most recent iteration of Victory Day has seen heavily scaled-back equipment displays in Moscow, as Putin feared that Russia's usual displays could attract Ukrainian drones. And that's the last thing that he wanted at an event where he would have to put in an appearance. So the parade ended up being nothing of note, all due to Putin's paranoia. Still, as much as we might mock Putin for being so scared of Ukraine's drones that he is taking all of these insane measures, his paranoia isn't without merit. Ukraine can hit practically anything with its drones, and it's been using non-stop long-range attacks against Russia to prove that throughout 2026. The message of "you can run but you can't hide" rang the loudest in July, when Ukraine's drones traveled about 2,500 kilometers to score direct hits on the Omsk refinery in Siberia. And just like that, not even Russia's Asian territory was safe anymore. Putin would have seen that and known that he had to stay hidden. Unless he wanted to run all the way to the furthest eastern regions of Russia, he simply couldn't show his face without the sorts of measures that we saw during his Novosibirsk visit. Even if he decided to run, he wouldn't be able to put enough distance between himself and Ukraine's drones for long. He already knows that Ukraine can hit the Kremlin whenever it wants. Ukraine first did that way back in May 2023, and it has successfully sent drones into the Moscow region several times since. But running also isn't an option. On July 24th, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky revealed that the country's drone developers are working on new long-range UAVs that will be able to travel between 5,000 and 10,000 kilometers. Those drones are going to be ready at some point in 2027, Zelensky said. If that's true, there will be literally nowhere in Russia that Putin can go where he will feel safe. And with Ukraine increasingly incorporating AI into its drones, making them harder for signal jammers to disrupt, Putin can't even rely on an already fragile Russian air defense network to protect him. No wonder he's scared. He should be. Ukraine has turned the strongman of Russian politics into a weakling. So where does all of this leave Putin now, as he travels in armored trains on secret railroads while sending decoy motorcades to cloned offices to release canned footage, all so he can avoid anybody knowing where he is? Well, that question pretty much says it all, doesn't it? Putin has created a bubble around himself that leaves him completely detached from reality. He is essentially living in a state within a state, and has been for years. That's according to Gleb Karakulov, a former Russian security officer who defected from his country in 2022. He describes Putin as a man who is pathologically afraid for his life, adding, "Our president has lost touch with the world. He has been living in an information cocoon for the past couple of years, spending most of his time in his residences, which the media very fittingly call bunkers. And as he isolates himself, the circle of people that he trusts grows smaller and smaller. There are very few in Russia that Putin actually trusts, and those he will listen to have their own interests in mind. LCI claims that only the heads of the FSO and the Russian National Guard, who are tasked with protecting Putin, are trusted in 2026. And both of those people would love to see their organizations become more powerful. So you can bet that they're dripping whatever honey they need to drip into Putin's ear to make that happen. Another defector named Vitaly Brizhaty told Russian outlet TV Rain in September 2023 that Putin doesn't even trust his own bodyguards. When heading to his Crimean residence, Brizhaty says Putin will announce to his bodyguards that he is arriving at 2 different airports, and then often not turn up at either, having taken a different route. Brizhaty echoes Karakulov's sentiments, saying, "That's how much this man fears for his life." And if you think those few bodyguards Putin will allow near him could have something as simple as a smartphone on their person, then think again. Putin is as terrified of the digital world as he is of the real one, so he isolates himself from that too. Putin declared that he didn't have a smartphone in 2018, claiming that such phones put you at risk of having your location discovered. Putin's constant throttling of the internet in Russia, which has led to declines in usage of up to 40% in some regions, and is expected to result in a 10% decline across all of Russia by the end of 2026, serves his paranoia. No internet access means less chance of his location being discovered, of enemies at home or abroad conspiring against him, of drones being able to get through because mobile internet signals interfere with air defenses. The last one is the official Kremlin excuse for the constant net blackouts, by the way. Putin, always a slave to paranoia, is now the single most terrified man in the entire world. And that is all Ukraine's doing. Russia's leader has been reduced to spending his final years living in a bubble, detached from the country he leads, and increasingly willing to hand over powers to others as long as those others can keep everything and everybody else away from him. Putin is trapped in his own little world, a world filled with so much fakery and deception that he's fooling himself as much as anybody else. This is Putin's fate. He will spend the rest of his life worrying that something bad will happen to him. And even if it never does, that's a huge win for Ukraine. The strongman of Russian politics has been exposed as a fearful little man. And it's only going to get worse for Putin from here. As dangerous as Russia's leader believes it is to simply be him, it's a lot more hazardous to be one of his cronies right now. Russia's Aerospace Forces commander, Colonel General Alexander Chaiko, discovered that firsthand in the brutal August 1st bombing of a restaurant where he was holding a party. This event was just another signal to Putin. The assassins are operating in Moscow, and some of them come bearing gifts. Find out more by watching our video. But first, don't forget to subscribe to The Military Show so you don't miss any of our examinations into the fractured psyche of Vladimir Putin. And thank you, as always, for watching.